Welcome to the Open Air Podcast. My name is Devang Desai, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Simon Bushell in his fanciest dress because it's that time again. For the final time, the Golden Racket. Simon, welcome.
Start playing the music. We're going to get played off stage very shortly.
It's that time. For some reason, I wanted Vitamin C's graduation to play on this on this intro, but Dylan scratched that. We don't need that at all, and we probably don't have the rights. But it is awards time, Bush. It is a time to reflect. We're reflecting a whole lot these days as Open Arrow wraps up. But with each passing news story, I feel more comfortable with this decision we've made, Simon, because going through my picks for our awards, I found myself filled with not anger, maybe, but resentment. I don't know. It was a strange year.
That's a hell of a thing to bring to the penultimate episode of this show. Anger and resentment.
Anger and resentment. I think that was my name for the title, but I guess we'll go with Golden Rackets.
Still time. We can always change it.
Yeah. So we'll go through our picks. I told Bush before we started, we have a lot of similar ones, but there's obviously commentary to offer here. But I think there's some quick fire ones. Off the hop, though, ATP Player of the Year, Bush. You pick Jannik Sinner. Not a hugely controversial pick, but I guess my question is, has any of the off-the-court stuff factored into your pick, or is this purely a tennis pick?
It is purely a tennis pick. I think I would have picked Alcaraz if I was doing this in a more... Well, I guess technically it's our show, right? We could do whatever. Obviously he will and has won the ATP Player of the Year. Just out of spite, I'm giving it to Carlos Alcaraz then.
That's what I did. That's my pick is Carlos Alcaraz for that reason. Literally because that didn't happen to him. And because of that, he is golden. He is the golden boy, but he also won 2 slams. Like, it's not like we're picking someone who won in Monte Carlo and Madrid and that's it, right? Like, this is a spite pick, but it's got some justification to it.
Feels reasonable, right? We said what was the title of the show? Anger and resentment.
Anger and resentment, yeah.
We're leading it off in the right way possible.
And I'll try and shelve that for maybe in part 2 when we get into biggest beef, etc. But listen, the reason I had to pick Alcaraz is because of spite. I mean, that's a perfect it's a perfect metaphor for tennis today. WTA Player of the Year. Doping or no doping, it was going to be Aryna Sabalenka, Bush. I think her rise towards the end of the season, eventually culminating in her taking the number 1 ranking. I mean, it was also due to Iga missing some tournaments, which we later learned were not due to the reason she had indicated at the time. But on merit alone, I think Sabalenka is a good pick here. And also, I think the way the season ended, some good matches. I think the Zhang match in particular was one that I was like, okay, like we're going to get something good hopefully in 2025 when it comes to various rivals and not just Iga for Sabalenka. But I think she is a good pick for Player of the Year on the WTA.
Same with me. I picked her as well. I don't think it's particularly close this season. If we said anger and spite for Sinner, we can't pick Swiatek here for similar reasons. Also, I don't think she deserves it either. I think Sabalenka is world number 1 on merit. I think she deserves that title, let's put it that way, deserves that status. And I think she also deserves the title of WTA Player of the Year as well. So she's my pick as well.
Some quick ones. I think these are easy ones. WTA Newcomer of the Year, Lulu Sun, Bush, was your pick, but I want to say default because I think the rise is incredible. I believe she went from 214 into the top 40 by September. So to start the season at 214 and to end to the top 40 is what I thought Gabriel Diallo was going to do last year. But this actually happened. She had an incredible run to the Wimbledon quarterfinals. She made the final in Monterrey. She beat Zhang at Wimbledon, don't forget. So that's a good pick. But I mean, overall, not a huge glut of players to pick from. And I think that was kind of similar with Mensik as well. I don't know if you thought there were some more other deserving candidates, but I think Mensik and Lulu Sun make a lot of sense for newcomers.
Yeah, maybe you could lean in the Pesci Pericard direction as well on
Yeah.
the ATP side if you're curious around that. Jakub Mensik, I think, is the right pick here. I think he's still youngest player inside of the top 50 in the world, so he's going to have a long and storied career. It's been quite the rise this season. He looks like a really good player, Dev. So remember the time that I was saying that I didn't think that Alex de Minaur was a top 10 player, and he went and proved me wrong. I think Jakub Mensik is equally a top 10 player. Like in the me betting against de Minaur, I'm betting the house on Jakub Mensik being a top 10 player. That's how high I am on him. So happy to give the award here to him.
And he'll be at the 2024 Next Gen Finals that for some reason haven't happened yet. I did not realize, Bush, that the ATP Next Gen Finals are going down from December 18th to the 22nd in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Why is my main question here, but also, could you guess more than Mensik as one of the 8 participants? You can. I think you can. But I'll be honest here for myself. As we got towards the bottom, I was surprised and confused by some of the names. But I think this tournament itself, just to channel back to anger and resentment, why is this happening now?
Boy, are we recording on December the 6th here. And the season's over, guys. Wrap it up. Come on.
What's happening here?
Let
We've
it
got
go.
Arthur Fies, of course. Arthur Fies is the showstopper. You got Alex Mickelson. And then Mensik and then Shang Zhengcheng, who's also nominated for Newcomer of the Year. Lerner Tien, I think Nishesh Vasas Varedi had some nice challenger wins. But yeah, a lot of names I don't recognize. This tournament, whatever, man. Like, why is it happening here? Let's move on to...
Those are some good players, by the way. Like, I know for all of the clowning that we can give to the Next Gen Finals, I think Alex Mickelson will be a good fixture in the top 50 for a long time, top 30.
Van Ash.
Van Ash is a good player. Like, he's a really, really talented kid. Lerner Tien's had a really good end of the season. A lot of the USTA are really high on him. Shang's had a great end of the season as well. So there's a ton of talent in here, and obviously Feast being the crown jewel of this. God, I got to stop using that in relative to Saudi Arabia. But more broadly, I think this is actually a surprisingly good field. The bottom end of it, I know nothing about João Fonseca. I have absolutely no idea who he is. If I was going to watch this tournament, I'd be excited to watch him. I will make do, and it will have to suffice to be watching YouTube highlights of him instead.
An interesting aspect, I guess you can't say, is that they changed the age limit from 21 to 20. So that's kind of noteworthy, I think. Mm-hmm. But moving on, Simon. Most improved. This one, I think, is maybe the most subjective. Really, you can go anywhere with these picks, but I liked yours, so I'll let you go first.
Yeah, so ATP, I picked Taylor Fritz. WTA, I picked Jasmine Paolini. There was a couple of ones here, actually, that I was really on the fence around. I almost picked Sabalenka, but that I thought, was a stinky pick, and I didn't do it. And you could make the case for Jack Draper as well on the ATP. Mm-hmm. I think I picked Fritz a few weeks ago for this award to go from where he was. I think this is the hardest jump in maybe all of sport, honestly. Certainly in tennis, to be able to go from a top 15, that kind of range, to a top 5 player is the hardest thing you can do. He made it look really simple. I think he made fools out of many people. I'm covering my own ass. He made a fool out of me. Jasmine Paolini's rise is different, right? I think one of those ones where just a really consistent, incredible season. And with both of these players, I think they're on merit. I think legitimately they think they have a good chance of repeating what they did in 2024 and 2025. So those would be my 2 picks.
That's a good one. And I think Fritz as well is one of the last few players of his generation that had to come up in this era that was so difficult for that final breakthrough. I think that does make this jump, I think, extra special. But I think I was going to lean Draper, actually, myself, Bush, on the ATP side. There's a few good options. Pesci Pericard as well had a huge rise in the rankings. I think, like Lulu Sun, he went from 200s to 30, right? Which is frankly nuts. So I like those two. And then I think on the women's side, it's really hard to pick against Paolini. But I think Diana Schneider had a really good year. She obviously had an insanely good week in Toronto, which I saw up close, which I think was why I wanted to pick her. I think Danielle Collins improved enough, Simon, that she's not going to retire anymore. So I feel like that's a good sign that she had a good year. I mean, we've hated on her, but you've been a stan for a while, a pseudo stan. I don't know if you are actually, but Emma Navarro has gotten better. Like, I don't think we have to like anything about the story necessarily, but the player herself, she's gotten better.
Absolutely. Yeah, no doubt about that. From where she started the season to being a player that the tour is afraid of, and rightfully so. She's a contender, I think, at every Grand Slam. She's going to be very much a fixture in the 2025 calendar season. I'd be curious to see, especially when players come up like that through the college ranks, and she's been grinding out for a while, but like to have the ascent that she did, I think it's going to be harder for her to stay at the top of the game than it is for Jasmine Paolini. It wouldn't shock me to see a little drop off in form, but who knows? That is for another podcast to dissect, not for this one.
It's true. There was ATP's tough. Like, I think Thomas Mahak as well had a really good year. I mean, he was known as a doubles guy. He won doubles with Barb in Paris, but he also went from, I think, 78 at the end of 2023 to 25 in singles, which is pretty nuts, right? So I think that's a phenomenal year for him. Let's go to match of the year on both sides, Simon. The WTA match of the year, really, to me, Madrid, Sabalenka, Swiatek was exceptional, and I have a hard time beating that. But I will say Rybakina, Swiatek, and Stuttgart, excellent match this year. And I think Sabalenka, Zhang, and Wuhan were also really good. So I agree with Swiatek, Sabalenka, and Madrid, but until Elena Rybakina was felled by every illness known to man, and I hope she gets better, I think that match with Swiatek and Stuttgart was special. And unfortunately, as we documented on the pod this year, Rybakina wasn't able to be fit for large swaths of this year. But when she was, there was a reason why she was part of this big three, quote unquote.
I'm so cynical at this point. Is there any absence from the tour now? I'm just expecting a press release to come out a couple of weeks later.
Yeah.
Nah, I'm kidding. That's clearly not the case here. We're not going to get done for liable. We wish the Rybakina camp and Rybakina herself a speedy recovery back to the tour. Swiatek, Sabalenka is my pick in Madrid. I think probably the best match of the year, men or women, I might say, just for the storyline, the quality of tennis, for what was at stake. It was high quality. It was excellent. No real arguments on that one. Mine's so, my two matches of the year are so boring. Alcaraz, Sinner in Beijing, Swiatek, Sabalenka in Madrid. I picked the world number 1 and 2 for both. I'm aware that Carlos Alcaraz is not the world number 2, but if anyone's going to try and tell me that Alexander Zverev is the real world number 2, then come on at this point. So those are my two picks. I feel very basic about it, but I think it is honestly, I think they're the best matches of the year.
All right. Those were our first few picks for our Golden Rackets of 2024 match of the year. Most improved, newcomers, player of the year. But when we come back after the break, it's the good stuff. Services to tennis, the biggest story, biggest beef, fuck you tennis award, all of that coming up next on Open Era. Welcome back to the Open Air podcast. It's the Golden Rackets, our year-end award show. We've gone through the real awards, quote unquote, now for the good ones, the Open Air specials.
Not the proper ones.
Simon, the proper ones, the good ones. The first one is an important one, the Open Era Award for Services to Tennis. As I mentioned off the hop, in an era of resentment and anger, we needed these people to provide some light, some good moments, some feel-good stories. But the common theme that is emerging for me here, Simon, is that the people that helped us in our spite missions are the ones who are rewarding the most.
Yeah, and a repeat winner here. Not the player themselves, but who they have taken out of. The Open Era Award for Services to Tennis goes to anyone who consistently makes Alexander Zverev's life a misery on a tennis court. This year, I have given it to Taylor Fritz. You could also hand it to any player that beat Alexander Zverev through the 2024 calendar season. So once again, our best goes out to that long and noble list.
Phenomenal. And I mean, yeah, there was the Morgan stuff with the shade that wasn't shade, and then there was also, I think, us grappling with the idea of like, what does it mean to cheer against Zverev's opponents, and like how much stock should we put into this? But just from the sporting experience and watching the Zverev camp flounder as Taylor Fritz hits bombs by them, that was especially good. I'm going to go a bit off the wall here, Simon, and say I mentioned Juan Martín del Potro and the tough stories that have been coming out regarding him in retirement, and how many just the struggles and the injury and the pain, and it sounds like maybe some misdiagnoses that went into stuff. But I watched the highlights of the Buenos Aires final match, Bush, with him and Novak there, which is extremely emotional, and damn, that was tough. But I've gone the complete other way on Novak, maybe you'll say. But I think it's nice that he went to Buenos Aires in December to do this. And I think it is Novak kind of clutching into, oh my God, the era is over and all my friends are gone. But I had that feeling as well. So I think overall that kind of vibe, that feeling, maybe it falls into the biggest story of the year for me as well. But I think in this year that overall had so many bad stories, I think the camaraderie in some respects was nice to see, because in my formative years, a lot of my time was spent watching these guys compete against each other. So I don't know. I found that somewhat comforting.
So your award goes to Delpo or to Djokovic? I'm trying to work it out here.
It goes to both of them. It goes to Novak, I think, understanding that it's all over. So maybe it's some sort of award for Novak, kind of recognizing the moment.
All right.
It's a reach. I can't take Fritz, you know? So I can't also, because I doubled up on a bunch of your picks. But listen, man, it was a bad year.
It was, yeah. And also, it's the Golden Rackets. Who cares?
It's true. So let's do biggest story then. And I mean, how could it not be the two number ones, or the one number one and one former number one testing positive, right? I think the Nadal retirement is probably the one we all want to think about. And it probably will be in the grand scheme of thing, but I don't know, man. It's hard to bypass the elephant in the room.
Well, biggest story is a interesting one to sort of examine, isn't it? So objectively, taking a step back from it, Rafael Nadal retiring from the sport of tennis probably got more headlines, probably made bigger waves around the world. So I think objectively, it's the biggest story of the season, is the retirement of, the greatest clay court player ever, greatest, whatever you want to call it, whatever category you want to throw it in. I'm not getting into that conversation now. But how could the Open era biggest story of the season not be the world number ones testing positive for banned, illicit, whatever substance, whatever word you want to describe it as? It is a absolutely staggeringly huge story that has massive, far-reaching ramifications in the sport of tennis for years to come. And I think outside of some of the other stuff that we'll come on to in a second, it probably will be my lasting memory at the back end of this 2024 campaign, that there's massive asterisks over two of the best players in the world on the tour. And the worst part about that is it tars the sport more broadly, is that I'm sitting watching, I will be watching the Australian Open thinking, I wonder how many of these other players are going through the same thing as well. And that's not a good thing.
No, I agree. And I think that's why I came into this so hot, so heated, Bush, is because I think you're totally right. And anytime there's an absence taken or an unexplained absence, people won't be given the benefit of the doubt. And I know they weren't before. Realistically, I think we were long past that as a society. But yeah, I mean, it'll be hard to really trust anyone, even if I think the authorities say they're clean or say that they've ramped up these measures. I think it's just a perfect allegory for society or how everything else works, in that if you have enough resources, if you have enough power or fame, you can glide by these kind of things. Whereas if you don't, if you're Elysium or somewhere else or someone a different player who does not have this stature, you're kind of screwed, right? Unless you have the backing of a legal team or people in high places to support you, it's not the same. And I think that's just like the real world as well. So in a way, I applaud tennis for being so revealing about all of this because it's kind of how the world works, and tennis does a really good job of splicing it down to the nitty gritty. And in general, that's kind of the vibe tennis gives off these days to me, Bush, from the country clubs set on down. So I don't know if for a sport to have this kind of scandal, like it's so on the nose, and I'm like, man, like it's frustrating, saddening, but also like, I mean, I'm not surprised this happened to these bodies again.
I think tennis has done a remarkably good job of presenting itself as clean to the world. I think because of the high profile incidents of athletes at the top of the sport, I'm looking at Maria Sharapova, largely came on the downswing of her career and also was in a period of time where, I'm not sure the eyes of the tennis world and the more broader sporting world were still on her in the same way. Since that point, you could make the case Halep was probably the most high profile person since then, but it's done a remarkably good job, is it not, to kind of remain out of the spotlight from this perspective. Man, feels like it really does have a problem. It's just no one's really willing to talk about it.
I've seen a few articles recently, actually, in outlets that I'm surprised. Like my former employer, The Score, wrote an article that I thought was well done on like the future of tennis, and it was a kind of a zoomed out kind of perspective, and they were acknowledging the departure of the big three and Novak leaving soon and Andy retiring and Serena leaving on the WTA, and like how do they fill that vacuum? How do they get people to care? And the idea that this didn't make bigger news is a very big sign, or a worrying sign, I think, for tennis, Bush, that Iga having this happen was a blip, if anything. So
I am curious to know as well of whether tennis itself is the canary in the coal mine for this amongst the wider sporting world, when you are in a situation where largely it's an arms race between those who are doping and WADA or the testers involved to see who can stay furthest ahead. Because like in a competitive world, you're always trying to gain an advantage. You're always trying to, obfuscate the truth, all those kind of things. And is this a situation where the testers and the legal bodies have caught up to the point where now they're catching things that previously wouldn't have been being caught, and that's going to spill into the different areas of different sports? Or is this just like a freak event of two people and two camps that were just lazy, incompetent, naive, like any of these things? Who knows? I think that's one of the more fascinating things to watch in 2025.
best beef this season, Simon. What do you got?
I chose the Francis TFO umpired
Yeah.
Jimmy Pinogate one. We didn't cover this. I think this was during a period of time at the back end of the season when we were on a break.
Yeah.
This was awful. This is a terrible look
Bad.
for Francis
Very
TFO.
bad.
All the things that we've said about people berating umpires and, being childish, being passive aggressive, never outright telling umpires to fuck off, like never like outright in their face level of bad. Really quite hostile, quite aggressive, quite angry. Really dreadful look for TFO, and seems like a good one to pick for best beef. Doesn't color him in a particularly good light, I thought anyway, coming away from that. I know we all lose our temper to a certain degree, and I think he's tremendously liked off the court. You don't act that way unless if something is, unless there is something behind it, right? I don't think we all losing. I guess the point I'm making is we all lose our temper, but to what extent do we lose our temper? And this was pretty bad.
Was bad, and yeah, like it makes you think, like, oh, wonder what happens when we don't see what's happening. just in general. But yeah, I want to believe it's a one-off. That was bad, very very cringy and awful to observe. Just in general, some of the umpire player interactions this year were off-putting, and like some of the umpires seemingly not paying attention, and like that being a running gag. I'm going to nominate the Vekic Zheng beef as my pick. That Olympic final was extremely dicey and testy. I think obviously the stakes were very high, but I think Zheng doing the Iga stuff with the time wasting or pausing, whatever you want to call it, it's going to be a bigger story next year because I don't think a lot of players like those two at all. So I felt like that was the best beef because it had the highest stakes.
Is what happens when two ice queens meet each other.
Don't give the marketing geniuses involved any ideas, but yeah.
Can you have two ice queens at the same time? It doesn't. That's not how royalty and nobility works.
On to the big award of this year, the Fuck You Tennis Award. What don't you like about the sport? There's too many things to list here right now. I think you've repeated some of them, Simon, in here, but in Bart Simpson writing on the chalkboard style format. It's all bad, though. I don't know which one you want to pick here. Like,
shall I read it in order, just to
read it in order.
Hammer home on the gag? Okay, here we go. Failed drug tests, Saudi Arabia. Long seasons, Saudi Arabia. Late night finishes, Saudi Arabia. Elon Musk in attendance at the US Open, Saudi Arabia. The Davis Cup, Saudi Arabia. Turfdom in tennis, Saudi Arabia. Which one of those do you pick?
I mean, I'm stunned you left off Nick Kyrgios, tennis commentator.
Oh God, I
life,
missed that one.
Yeah, I'm stunned you left that one off. Nick Kyrgios tennis czar. Like, you'll be commentating any freaking tournament that's on. Holy cow, what a list. What a list. I want to add stupid exos, which is kind of covered by Saudi Arabia. They're so tough, Bush. I think for just the general sanctity of the game, or maybe not sanctity, but like the future of the sport, and its viability, blah, 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 all that stuff. All of these things are related. So I have a hard time picking one of them out, if that makes sense, Simon, whether it be Saudi Arabia, Davis Cup, Elon Musk at the US Open, late night finishes. I think capitalism can be blamed for most of these things, but maybe failed drug tests could be too, in the pursuit of more gains, unlimited gains, constant gains, and that's what the doping leads to. But I still think it's the drug tests for me as the worst thing about this year, because a sport already on the cusp of irrelevancy has now decided to put its foot fully in the pool of it. And I'm worried about what happens when we come out of it, or what other steps they take to make it worse, So I'm going to go back to that one.
So the thing that I am fascinated to watch post when Djokovic is gone, I'm trying to think if there's anyone else on the women's side. No, Serena's gone. I mean, Venus is gone for all intents and purposes. So let's say the 2000s crowd is gone at this point. So all of the biggest quote unquote stars, and I mean like mega star, Sharapova's obviously gone as well. Do people like tennis for tennis? Do the people that go to Wimbledon, do the people that go, like, and I mean more broadly, maybe not the hardcore fans, I mean more broadly as people that are attracted to tennis, the product, the brand of tennis. Is it tennis, or is it Serena Williams? Is it Maria Sharapova? Is it Roger Federer or Rafael Nadal? That's the question that I have. And are the stars that follow it big enough to continue to attract your, not even influence a brand of people, but like more, I guess the capitalist lens on this is like, do Rolex care about tennis if those names are not there? Is Yannick Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz big enough? Is Iga Swiatek big enough? Or is tennis like just kind of a bit irrelevant without big names in it?
The luxury brands will care. They'll always care because they got some stuff to sell and they have people to sell it to. But that pool of people, I don't know how big that is. I've seen people commenting on like people finding it hard to like watch men's tennis because of length, and like these are sports fans, and these aren't people who I think are turning up their nose at tennis necessarily. But I don't know. I'm quite worried. Let's just say that about where this all nets out. But I'll be with you watching tennis in the middle of the night during the Australian Open. How many people will be when it's like, hell, I don't know, Tabio Draper in one semifinal and Zverev Fritz in the other? I don't know.
They're not global brands, right? They're not global icons and
No.
figures. They just aren't. They're all. I mean, Zverev's not a good player, but the other ones all are, right? And but they're not a draw in the same way. And I know stars take time and it takes marketing dollars, but it also takes success. It takes people who have extraordinary abilities and that are like transcendent or generational in terms of how good they are, that have largely attracted eyeballs in the last 2-3 decades. And we can all raise our eyebrows at that and all be upset about it. But unfortunately, that's just the reality of how this stuff has gone for the last, since neoliberalism has taken a foothold in the world.
So let's go into predictions then for next year, because this one of yours here, Bush's baby, the only way this is all saved is that Alcaraz wins all 4 slams and gets to like 20 within 3 years. I think we need some comical winning streaks. We need some invincibility. We need foils, which I think we have that a bit developing. Sabalenka, Swiatek, Sinner, Alcaraz, sure, but what do you got prediction-wise for next year?
Man, I love this section because I can just say anything and then just run away.
Whatever you want.
I need to go back and see mine last year, see how wrong I was about it. Okay, I'm going to give you 4. So you mentioned one of them. Charlie wins all 4. Remember, this is outlandish predictions. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but these are outlandish predictions. Number 2, we are going to see an incredibly high number of positive tests, of doping tests or drugs tests, including someone that's a high profile on the men's side who may be retiring next year.
This is the thing, though. I don't know, man. Yes, yes, but it would destroy the sport. So they cannot have
that would destroy the sport. I agree with you.
It's too big to fail. Yeah, this is too big to. This is Obama financial crisis being like, we gotta bail out the banks. We can't do anything about this.
That's Craig Tiley on the phone immediately.
Yeah, I knew. We gotta let this ride. We've got to let this
What's
ride.
the meme? He's driving around Dallas asking for people's numbers. Whatever that, I don't know what it is. Something like that.
The other thing I thought of is like retroactive testing that they do when they found out that everyone was doping, if they want to, or if someone does some investigative reporting. But anyways, that's not a bad shout either. I do feel like the level of carefulness has to increase, right? Or like detection, money spent avoiding detection, all that jazz. That has to be increased as well, but we'll see.
You hit on something that I have only just thought about when you said it out loud, which is, where is there more money that goes into avoiding testing, or is there more money that goes into testing? I think we all know the answer to that question, which is probably why people aren't being caught. Anyway, that's I don't even know if that's cynical. I think that's probably just reality, to be honest. I think that might just be the unfortunate state of everything.
Well, it goes back to the resources thing, right? So I like Mira Andreeva at number 1. That's a bullshit. Slightly insane, but I like it.
I was trying to come up with some WTA ones which wouldn't just be like two players win everything for the next 12 months.
Jess Pegula attends the Super Bowl and sees good things happen, because I'm not going to jinx anything. How about that? That's a prediction.
Maybe a bold prediction I could say is that she's never going to win a Grand Slam.
Jesus. Wow. Okay. And on that note, you've got Saudi Arabia pulling funds from the WTA.
Yeah, that one's all right. That you can, if you start reading,
you can see how that goes down potentially. Yeah.
Again, like, is the WTA a big enough sports washing brand for a state which is trying to sports wash, or do they get bored by it and move their attention to something else? I'm making the case in an outlandish prediction they might do that.
Related, I've seen some reports of that the PIF scaling back their investment number by a pretty big number, and I've seen some Newcastle fans alarmed by that as well. So maybe not as outlandish as we think. as you prepare for the next gen finals that are happening again. Once again, why? But they're happening this month. Okay. These are all good. I was gonna say my Ash Barty one as just a final outlandish prediction that Ash Barty will win Wimbledon this year. I'm gonna change the major. Ash Barty to win Wimbledon. How about this? I think Coco Gauff is the world number one at the end of the year. I think that's bolder. That's pretty bold considering that I don't think she's in the sphere of Swiatek and Sabalenka at this moment. But I've got Goff going to number one, and I've got Novak not winning a slam, which I don't think is that outlandish, but I think we do get some very random slam results. So I don't think we have the same winner at any slam, and I think this signals the new ice age for the ATP. Not to be dramatic about it, but God, I hope Carlos is clean because man.
Look, dude, we've podcasted for 7 years together. I'm never going to tell you how to podcast. I chose Mira Andreeva getting to year-end number one as an outlandish prediction. You picked Coco Gauff, the world number 3.
Look at the points, bro. He's behind by 3,000. It's true. No, I saw Andreeva there, and I shuddered at the outlandishness of that. And I couldn't upgrade it with Magda Linette. You know how much I wanted to say Magda Linette would be number one in the year 2025? As some sort of splinter project with the Heritage Fund or whatever the hell they're doing in the US. Oh God.
That Andreeva pick. So do I need to justify this? I feel like I don't need to justify this.
No.
She's 17. She's 17 in the world, right, as well, I think? Or 16 in the world? Like she's 16 in the world.
16, yeah. She's 16, but she's 17 and a half.
Yes.
Age-wise.
Exactly. Go figure. She's already been to a Grand Slam semi-final. She's good on all surfaces. I could see it.
Oh, it's very good. It's a very good pick. But next year, Ash Barty's going to win 2 slams then.
Isn't Ash Barty literally pregnant at the moment?
Listen, you just yelled at me for not going bold enough, and I gave you just what you wanted. I fed you just what you wanted, and it wasn't good enough. It wasn't good.
I mean, there's outlandish and there's ridiculous.
Wow.
Actually, it seems plausible, and I can see it. I can definitely see it.
How about this? For outlandish? A Canadian men's player ends the year in the top 10. Take your coffee crisp and choke on that. How about that? That shows the Canadian chocolate bar there for our international listeners.
Is it Diallo? It probably is Diallo.
I mean, it's Diallo. Of course it's Diallo. What do you think, man? What do you think? Of course it's Diallo. Okay. Oh, yeah, that was fun. Okay. This is a nice way to end it, though, Bush. A personal positive tennis moment. Is it from this year, you're saying, I think?
I mean, it is from this year, yeah. So I went to the Paris Masters final, obviously. Could have picked any of the slams, could have picked the Olympics. I think we did how many episodes on the Olympics? It was just, there's many, many moments in that, which are maybe not tennis moments. I don't think it was largely, I'm not a big Djokovic fan, as regular listeners will know. So that did not strike me as a particularly emotional moment. So I sort of came back to this, for all of the stuff that we talk about, Queen's we. Let's put, for all the things that we talk about, let's go with that. About the season being too long and it being difficult to follow. There is also a strength in that. And for me, like clockwork, tennis is always there for you. Whether you want an event, whether you want something to watch, whether it's -5 degrees outside and covered in snow and you're watching the Australian Open, whether it's 40 degrees and massive humidity and you're watching Wimbledon, or whether it's the end of the season watching just complete and utter random nonsense from around the world, in both directions, like positive and negative, there'll always be some tennis available to you. And the same can't be said for any other sport. I think its length is a massive problem and needs to be curtailed and needs to be addressed. But it is also kind of nice to have it there when you need it.
That's really well said, Bush. I mean, hell, it's part of the reason we did this podcast. Our love for it, the comfort that you find when you know there's always tennis on. I know that was a big one for me, especially during some trying moments this year on the personal side. Looking back at at tennis's meaning for me and my dad. It was extremely emotional this year, and I think the Olympics, like you mentioned, served as like, I really ran through the gamut of emotions, and I think Rafa lighting the torch and then Rafa losing early, and that dramatic twist, and even Novak, like I wouldn't count myself a Novak fan either, Bush, but I even that match I found myself moved in ways that surprised me a bit, and I think it's just because of all that's happened, and all the memories I'm looking back on regarding the sport and the relationships I've made and the memories I have, and looking back, and like I was looking back through some old photos I had on my phone, and I had Federer celebrating from that 27 Aussie Open win, Bush, and I think I was in Vancouver at the time, but I just remember feeling kind of alone, and I just moved to a new city and feeling quite far away, and having the idea of tennis being a companion and having something to watch, and those voices be with me, the sounds be with me, the people to talk to who also love the sport be with me as well. You really couldn't pass that up for the world. So I came in to start the show with hatred and animosity, Bush, but I end with gratefulness and thankfulness, because even through the muck, we do love this game, right? So what a year it's been.
I think it is a mark and a testament to how much we have covered the sport in 4 years, is a mark of how much we love the sport. We just want you to be better. Please, for the love of God, make better choices, make better decisions, and please listen to your athletes.
A good place to leave it. That is our penultimate episode of Open Era. We've got one left. It's our annual fireside chat, which we may include some tennis discussion, Bush. We probably won't. I think it'll be our final sign off, but we have one more left for you, so stay tuned for that. But once again, thank you to everyone, who sent us messages about the show. Since we notified everyone that we're going to be closing up shop, it's meant a lot. Really means a lot. So thank you for that. Thank you to Dylan, as always, on the ones and twos for putting the show together. And we will talk to you one last time soon for our final fireside chat. For Simon and myself, thank you for listening to Open Era. Take care.